Celeste Morgan's journey through injustice, racial profiling, and systemic corruption stands as a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the fight for true justice. Her wrongful arrest outside the very courthouse where she had dedicated nearly 2 decades of her life as a federal prosecutor became the spark that illuminated the deep flaws within a system many trusted blindly. What began as a humiliating encounter with 2 police officers escalated into a national reckoning, not only for Detroit but for the country at large. The story captures the complex intersection of race, power, and silence. It explores how even a person armed with the law and bound by its rules can become a target when prejudice overrules principles. Celeste's unwavering commitment to truth turned what could have been just another forgotten incident into a movement. Her discovery of the Tier 12 surveillance program, a covert system designed to disproportionately target communities of color, exposed the layers of discrimination hidden beneath bureaucratic language and technological algorithms. Her confrontation with Gerald Faulkner, the chief prosecutor, revealed the cold logic behind the system. Oppression disguised as stability, surveillance masked as risk management. But instead of bowing to threats or intimidation, Celeste leveraged the power of evidence, data, and collective voices to dismantle the machinery built to silence her and so many others. Through community forums, Senate hearings, and public testimony, Celeste gave voice to the voiceless, particularly Asha Wilkins, a young black girl whose future was nearly destroyed by this system. Their stories intertwined, illustrating the generational impact of racial profiling and the necessity for structural change. The outcome was not just a personal vindication for Celeste, but a legislative milestone, the passing of the Morgan Act, aimed at preventing the misuse of predictive policing and enforcing accountability within law enforcement. Yet, the true victory lay not in the policy alone, but in the restored belief that justice could still be reclaimed through persistence, exposure, and courage. Celeste's story concludes not with her becoming a symbol, but as a catalyst for hope and reform. Her quiet strength, refusal to be silenced, and determination to speak not only for herself but for all those who had been forced into silence, marks her as a defining figure in the ongoing struggle for civil rights and justice in America. In the months following the enactment of the Morgan Act, the reverberations of Celeste's efforts continued to ripple through communities and institutions. Town halls from Detroit to Philadelphia became spaces of open dialogue where families once afraid to speak out now shared their stories without fear. Young law students cited Celeste's case in their dissertations, and civic leaders called for similar legislation across other states. But the road ahead remained challenging. Faulkner's removal had only revealed the depth of complicity within the system as investigations uncovered other networks of bias and misconduct. Celeste, though weary from the fight, knew this was not the end but the beginning of a longer battle. Alongside civil rights attorneys, data scientists, and grassroots organizers, she began working on creating independent audits for all predictive policing technologies, ensuring transparency and fairness. For Asha Wilkins, the transformation was deeply personal. Supported by Celeste and community mentors, Asha returned to her studies and soon became a leading youth advocate for justice reform. Her speeches, raw and honest, reminded audiences that while laws could change policies, healing the wounds of injustice required continuous work and compassion. Celeste remained humble in the face of recognition. When national media outlets requested interviews, she often redirected attention to the communities most affected, insisting their voices be amplified instead. "This was never just my fight," she told one reporter. "It belongs to everyone who has ever been silenced." As winter approached, murals across Detroit continued to bloom, portraits of resistance, hope, and accountability. The mural of Celeste with the words "Justice looks like this" became a gathering point for reflection, education, and activism. Beneath it, young children left hand-painted messages, each a small pledge to carry forward the ideals Celeste had reignited. In the quiet of her home, with her daughter Amara by her side, Celeste often reflected on the path that had brought her here. The journey from a wrongfully cuffed prosecutor to a national voice for change had been one of pain, courage, and relentless truth-telling. But above all, it had been a journey of love for justice, for community, and for the future. And as long as the fight for equality endured, so would the legacy of Celeste Morgan, a legacy not written by titles or victories alone, but by the hearts she had helped to free and the dreams she had dared to protect. With each passing month, the cultural shift inspired by Celeste's story deepened. Universities across the country began integrating case studies on the Morgan Act into their criminal justice and public policy curriculums. Law schools launched fellowships in Celeste's name, focusing on advocacy, racial justice, and systemic reform, ensuring that future generations of legal minds would carry forward the mission she had ignited. Meanwhile, grassroots organizations, energized by Celeste's testimony and the passage of the act, expanded their reach into underserved neighborhoods. Community organizers hosted workshops to educate citizens on their legal rights, especially those most vulnerable to profiling. Across city parks and community centers, Know Your Rights seminars became commonplace, often ending with a simple yet powerful refrain: "You matter. You deserve justice." Celeste herself continued her work behind the scenes. Though many urged her to run for public office, she declined, believing her greatest impact was as a bridge between the law and the people it was meant to serve. She collaborated with data scientists to develop open-source tools that allowed communities to monitor local policing data themselves, empowering everyday citizens to become watchdogs of their own justice. Amara, now growing into a perceptive and empathetic young girl, began to understand the significance of her mother's work. She often accompanied Celeste to community forums, sitting quietly in the back, sketching portraits of the speakers. One evening, after attending a town hall meeting, Amara looked up at her mother and said softly, "I want to help, too." Celeste smiled, her heart swelling not with pride, but with the reassurance that the seeds she had planted were beginning to bloom in the next generation. As the anniversary of the Morgan Act approached, a national summit on racial justice and policing reform was scheduled in Washington, D.C. Celeste was invited as the keynote speaker, not to recount her personal story but to discuss the pathway forward, the ongoing responsibility of a nation to confront its own biases and reform its institutions. Standing before a diverse audience of policymakers, activists, students, and community members, Celeste delivered a speech that was neither bitter nor boastful. Instead, it was a call to act, a challenge to never let the work stop at legislation. "Justice," she said, "is not a destination. It is a journey we must recommit to every single day." The room responded not with applause alone, but with a quiet, collective resolve, a shared understanding that the work Celeste began was now theirs to continue. And so the fight endured. In classrooms, in courtrooms, in neighborhoods where the echoes of past injustices still lingered, the light Celeste had sparked remained. Not a flame of anger, but a steady beacon of hope, courage, and accountability, a reminder that the arc of the moral universe does indeed bend toward justice, but only when hands like hers and those she inspired reach out to pull it forward.